Hello, we're here today with Jim Pugel, who's running for Seattle City Council, District number 7. Jim, would you like to go ahead and give a 2-minute introduction?
Yes, thank you all for being here tonight on this beautiful evening. I'm Jim Pugel. I'm running for the first time in my life, and this is for Seattle City Council, District 7. I've lived in Seattle my entire life. Fortunate to have my 3 children here, my mom, and several of my brothers and sisters still live here as well as many friends and extended family. I attended Seattle Public Schools, the University of Washington, worked at Northwest Steel Rolling Mills, worked at Greyhound Bus Depot, and worked at Rainier Brewery to put myself through college. And the first year I got married and got hired by the Seattle Police Department in '83 and worked there for 31 years, all the way from a volunteer police officer through all ranks, through all assignments, through all neighborhoods of the city, to chief of police. I took some time off, then went with the King County Sheriff's Office and worked with them for 4 years. We contracted with many of the police services for many of the municipalities out there. The reason I'm running here for City Council, I think the City Council needs to be more transparent. They need to listen more, and they need to respond. That's one thing I'm hearing about on the doorbelling. In fact, I just spent 3 hours today doorbelling. And people just want to make sure the city's being taken care of. They're very generous, they say, with their levies. They just want the money spent. I've also worked with a lot of different groups as a police officer, as a police commander, and a chief with homeless service providers. Started a very innovative program with the Defender Association and the ACLU, what was called Law Enforcement Assisted Diversion, that took low-level, non-violent drug users, drug sellers, and prostitutes and diverted them to wraparound intensive case management.
All right, thank you. And now, if you would like, you can flip over the sheet, and I'll ask Brittany to start with question number 1.
If elected, what policies will you support to address the need for affordable housing and homeless services?
I think my approach to the homeless crisis is the same as I take to drug policy reform. One is prevention. Let's try to prevent people from becoming homeless in the first place. There are myriad reasons why a person becomes homeless. Sometimes it's very little in their control. Sometimes it's a substance use disorder. Sometimes it's a mental health issue. Very rarely I've found in 35 years of policing and working with human service providers like Downtown Emergency Service Center, Plymouth Housing, Evergreen Treatment Services, very few is it a choice to become homeless. People want to be sheltered. So I would do everything I could to leverage the mapping that King County Assessor John Wilson's done to date, showing the private or the publicly owned surplus lands in Seattle that can be converted as a result of a year and a half ago, the legislative session allows us to convert state, county, regional, or city property that's surplus over into housing. One of the biggest drivers of the cost of housing here is land. And there are plenty of developers out there who would be able to develop stable housing, whether it's for people who all they need is housing, whether it's people who need housing that is known as supportive housing, or any mixture there, whether it had addiction therapy or any type of intensive type of case management. I have a record of working with a lot of public service providers, human service providers in my years with Youth Care, Melinda Giavengo and Dan Malone at the Downtown Emergency Service Center, as well as Evergreen Treatment Service Providers.
Thank you. Robert?
Shifting gears somewhat, Seattle has the most progressive tax code and the state with the most progressive tax code in the country. Given the repeal of the head tax and the ongoing litigation over the city income tax, how do you raise more progressive revenue to help fund all our city services?
There are myriad ways of how we get our money here in Seattle. There's at least 20 different type of revenue streams, whether it's federal grants, whether it's fines, parking infractions, parking revenue, property taxes, or the levies. We have to make sure that we are spending those well. I'm hearing right now on door billing, a lot of the people that I'm meeting who are in their 70s own their residential properties free and clear, but they can barely afford the levies and the other taxes that continually go up there, where they have a fixed income, whether it's Social Security or pension or whatever. I think we have to look at that. I think because the state is the only one that can say what kind of income tax there should be, I think we should work collectively. I think the will is there, at least in King County and Snow County and Pierce County, Kitsap County, to work with the legislature and get a reasonable income tax. I publicly supported the capital gains tax. I don't think it passed in this last legislative session. It would have taxed anything in 1 year, within one 12-month calendar year, of anything of 100,000 or more. I don't think that tax, but we have to somehow legally make the law so that it's a fair tax system and not regressive. The poorer you are, the less money you have, the higher rate your tax is, and it's incredibly unfair.
Thank you. Summer?
Given the city's reset of the Move Seattle levy, the upcoming expiration of the city's bus funding caps, and the planning for light rail through much of our district, what will be your priorities in deciding how the city spends its transportation funds?
Having done police work a long time and seeing how incrementally, at a much quicker rate, people are now walking to work, at least in District 7, in the downtown, the Belltown, the South Lake Union, the uptown, the Lower Queen Anne area. They are walking to work now. We have to make sure that those sidewalks and the wheelchair ramps and those who choose to wear bike or use bikes, that those lanes, those sidewalks, those ramps are well maintained. I think the second would be working with Metro. I believe it was Proposition 1 where countywide the tax failed, so we as a city said we still want that revenue to go to you. But we also have to work with Metro. I worked for 4 years with King County and got to know Rob Gannon, who runs Metro. I'm a strong believer in that we need more public bus transportation. I'm in love with light rail, but it's limited on where it can go. Bus transportation is mobile, it's agile, it can go a different route if there's a collision and still get people to work, get people home, or to where they need to get to go. We have to do some training programs though to get bus mechanics, bus drivers, and all the people that it takes to run that infrastructure so that it's dependable. We are not going to stop growing as a city. There's at least 110,000 people that come into downtown Seattle, 85,000 which come on Metro bus, the rest come on light rail, others come on cars, but I would really focus on the Metro bus system and making it robust and dependable and more 24-hour.
Okay. Ben?
How will you continue the process of reforming the Seattle Police Department beyond the expiration of the consent decree?
Having been there when it started and working with Jenny, who's now the mayor, but she was the U.S. attorney, she and I worked together many years. She was a firearms review board civilian observer in the 90s, so I got to know her there. She's fair. I believe that with what Merrick Bob and Judge Robart have instituted with the settlement agreement, I believe, and having monitored it closely, I believe that they are going to meet sustained compliance. Unfortunately, most of society's problems, the police officers and to a degree the firefighters end up because they're the ones who are out there 24/7. So there are always going to be terrible tragedies, but we have to stick to the fundamentals good recruitment, good initial training, good field training with qualified field training officers. Not someone who just wants to make the extra money and rate a kid, a young lady or a young man who's a brand new cop, but really teach them more than they learned in the academy. We need more supervisors out there. They say that we're understaffed. I know that department. We are understaffed in first line supervisors. The span of control is too much, and they have to be able to pay attention to the young woman and man on the street who are performing those high-risk jobs. Jobs that I certainly never saw, maybe only 10% of the time in the 80s and the 90s. Now, the mental health issues, substance use disorders, those things are taking up about 50% of their time. So they need constant training, retraining, and good supervision out there. And then always stay in touch with the community. Without the community support, then we have no integrity and we don't have what we call procedural justice.
Thank you.
We saw Summer and then Ben and then Lori, then Robert, then Reagan, and then Mike.
So I had a question about you. I wanted to go back to the progressive revenue to help fund our city services. And I wanted to know specifically, would you look at taxing businesses, big business, and if so, what ideas did you have for that, rather than just looking at taxing individuals or income tax?
Yes, I would look at taxing industry. Amazon and Boeing have gotten away with too much for too long. The fact that they pay very little, if any, taxes here. Now they do support great jobs at high paying rates, and they're employing just Amazon 60,000 some people, which has a trickle down. But they are making a huge amount of revenue and not paying any taxes on that revenue, at least federally. They have the ability. Having said that, last year I survived cancer being treated at Seattle Cancer Care Alliance. Many of the machines that I had my infusions on were donated by the Basil's Family Foundation or the Paul G. Allen Family Foundation. I looked later, they donate about $20 million annually to Seattle Cancer Care Alliance. I know that they donate some to the human service providers, whether it's Evergreen Treatment Services, but we need a dependable, reliable revenue stream and not just with the goodwill. I fully appreciate the goodwill and welcome it, but we need to maintain the city, the health, the safety, and the infrastructure of the city.
Thank you. Ben.
How many homeless people are living in King County right now?
I'm sorry?
How many homeless people are living in King County?
About 12,000.
And of them, what percentage are native to the area?
From the indigenous, from the Duwamish?
No, native to Seattle. We're here because you can
Oh.
resident. Thank you.
From my experience, from the one night point in time count, about 68 to 83% based on what number you're going to look at.
What action will you take in your first week of office to mitigate this crisis?
Really aggressively go after that surplus publicly owned land and start converting it. We've had a hole in the ground. It used to be the public health, public safety building since at least 2004. That's shameful. And we've been waiting to develop it and waiting to make it into partly private development, partly park. That's publicly owned land that is situated along amazing transportation routes. We need to look at this publicly owned land. I also want to look at, I keep bringing up the human service providers. I'm a big believer in housing first. Get the person housed in quality housing. If they need intensive case management, make sure that it's there. And then start bringing that person back to as healthy as they're able to get. It's way less expensive. Excuse me. It's less expensive than getting them in jail or continually sending them to Harborview for whatever the ailment is. I was involved in 1998 to 2000.
Thank you.
I thought a minute was left.
No.
Oh, I'm sorry. You too. Thank you.
Thank you.
As you know, a big part of District 7 sits in Magnolia. And if you've been door knocking at all, you've been hearing concerns about the Magnolia Bridge and transportation issues getting on and off the hill. Have you looked at the options that are on the table, and what's your thinking?
I've looked at the options and they're convoluted. There's another big piece of port property under that bridge that could be used for housing. I keep saying it. I think we have to look at, first I support the replacement of the bridge exactly as it is or where it is. I don't know, I'm not a civil or soil engineer. That is a liquefaction zone. That's why it should be condemned in the first place. But I do know the history. The port helped pay for it. Burlington Northern, before it was Burlington Northern Santa Fe, paid for it. The Army helped pay for it, the county, the state, and the city, and there was some type of local improvement district. I don't know if a lid would fly right now, but there are other agencies that are depending on that transportation. I would love to be on the transportation subcommittee in the council and work on these issues. That's going to be the harbinger of our success here as a region.
Thank you. Robert.
So I know, you're on the SPD command staff and chief of police, so you're familiar with how emphasis patrols work, and usually the emphasis patrols are responsive to like a spike in crime. We're seeing right now the mayor rolling out emphasis patrols in response to simple community requests in some cases where there has not been a spike in crime. If you're on the current city council is raising some serious questions about this.
I'm sorry.
He's raising some serious questions about this.
Right.
So if you're on city council and Mayor Durkin announces she's doing another round of emphasis patrols without a lot of data to back it up, what would your response be as a council member?
Look at the data. I'm a big believer in science and data. We can go to the 911 call center and we look at time of call coming in, time to create that call, time of dispatch, and then time of arrival. What did that call start out as? It may have started out as a theft. It really was a robbery. So you have to look at all the data and figure out what's going on. There is a perception drives police deployment. Not as often as real factors, but it's an emotional thing. I've been to so many events where I just came from a homicide and someone had their car broken in, and they don't want to hear about the homicide on Broadway. They want to hear about what you're going to do to prevent car theft or car break-ins. So there is an emotional aspect. You also have to make sure that the officers are doing and complying with what the monitoring agreement is, and making sure that it's constitutional policing. I'm a believer in the broken windows theory, but not the way it was implemented in New York, because they just went on after people of color.
Clayton?
This is not a particularly easy subject. Please take it as a friendly and yet kind of hostile question. It goes to the use of deadly force. Whenever deadly force is used these days, we hear cops say that they were in fear. I doubt that is part of the contract with the police union as a reason to use deadly force. So, what changes would you make in training of new police?
Sure.
To control using fear as an excuse?
Well, just like any other activity in your life, if you want to get good at something, you practice it in person, you are trained with it, you're evaluated on it, and then you also visualize. Any good sports athlete, this lady who's breaking all kinds of records at the UW, she visualizes herself making that. You have to visualize yourself becoming into potential lethal situations. I was a bit unpopular. I endorsed and sat in a commercial when Initiative 940 came out this last fall to hold officers to a standard that anyone else is going to be held. Before that, from 1985 until last fall, we were held to a standard that was impossible to prosecute. That killed our legitimacy as police officers. It didn't provide for procedural justice, and we lost faith in the community. I do know that 940 also mandated crisis intervention training and de-escalation training. The federal monitor has made sure that that training is in here in Seattle. It's now going to be statewide.
Thank you. One more, sorry.
So when you're answering the first question, you said people don't want to be unsheltered. And as a follow up, and just clarification for you in my actual question, when you said unsheltered, you meant homeless, correct?
Homeless, yes.
So do you, and seeing as how when you were asked by Ben how many homeless people there were in Seattle, you cited the one night count, which undercounted the amount of people who are sheltered and homeless. I wanted to ask, how much of your data has been, and your point of view on homelessness has been from interacting with homeless and formerly homeless folks, and how much of what you've been hearing or people who've been reaching out to are people who just don't like seeing homeless people?
I would say about 50% of it is having worked in the city of Seattle and participated in the one night count, and then also not participating in the one night count, but working on what was called with the King County government familiar faces. It's now called Vital, where we take 60 of the most prominent people who are circling through Harborview Jail, X amount of bookings in two of the last 3 years. I also, Dan Malone at Downtown Emergency Service Center, I've worked with him forever. I worked with his former boss, Bill Hobson. I worked with Melinda Giovango on youth who are being sexually exploited and getting them housed. So I get to data points. Probably the most aggressive group that I've ever worked with that really knows the true number would be Evergreen Treatment Services. There are reach workers that go out there. They're about the most amazing case managers I've ever seen.
Thank you. Sarah, did you want to go and answer the question?
Oh, yeah, I just was wondering what your position was on impact fees, whether or not you support them.
On what fees?
Impact fees on development,
Oh, I totally support that.
and what you would do to try to get one implemented at the city.
Well, again, I'm not I would get as much data as possible. I know that when we don't have impact fees that a lot of other municipalities do have, then our infrastructure is not maintained and kept up, our schools are not maintained and kept up. All the essential services that makes the city run well is not as well maintained. So we keep going back to everyone for levies. We have to make the developer pay for some of these mitigation fees.
Excellent. Thank you very much. If you'd like to take 30 seconds for a wrap up.
Okay, one question I wasn't able to finish, and that was my fault. One thing that I was involved in the late 90s and early 2000s was we had we called a chronic public inebriacy problem. Belltown, Chinatown, ID, and Pioneer Square. There were about 60 to 70 homeless men who were chronically drunk, cycling them through. We worked again with DSC, Downtown Seattle Association, Belltown Community, Pioneer Square Community, and created the first of its kind housing in the United States. It was pre-recovery, some people call it wet housing, but you could consume in your room. And it greatly reduced the amount of police calls, fire calls, the cost of treating them up at Harborview, and they're living better now. I think we can do that with a lot of the folks who are experiencing dysfunction out there with dignity.
Thank you so much.